Dead Space is a third-person survival horror video game developed by EA Redwood Shores for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Microsoft Windows. It is the first installment in the Dead Space series and was released on October 14, 2008 on PS3 and Xbox 360 and October 20 for Windows. The player takes on the role of an engineer named Isaac Clarke, who battles the polymorphic undead species called the Necromorphs on board a stricken interstellar mining ship named the USG Ishimura. The players must fight their way through various levels of a stricken mining ship, which has been infested with an alien species known as Necromorphs. The game features an over-the-shoulder third-person perspective, similar to games such as Resident Evil 4 and Gears of War. The interface does not feature a traditional heads-up display. Instead, information is relayed to the player via lights and translucent screens over which hover Isaac's weapons and armor. There are weightless and decompressed environments which Isaac can navigate using a pressurized suit equipped with gravity boots. Some levels will even lead out into the surface of the ship's hull. Floating debris will present a hazard, and Isaac can lose his footing with a simple float off into space, also risking running out of oxygen when in vacuum. In keeping with Isaac's profession as an engineer rather than a soldier, and consists of an array of bolt cutters, stasis fields, and rudimentary energy weapons. Combat in the game is complicated by the fact that most necromorphs are not simply rendered dead after a certain number of rounds have been fired at them. Rather, they must be dismembered a certain way to be dead, but they can adapt new stances and tactics, and even sprout new limbs, based upon where they have been wounded. The game's executive producer, Glen Schofield, has said that the primary theme of Dead Space dismemberment, and early previews of the game have noted the high levels of gore. During the process of mining the planet Aegis 7, the USG Ishimura sends a distress signal to the Concordance Extraction Corporation. The CEC dispatches the USG Kellion to investigate. As the Kellion attempts to dock with the Ishimura, a malfunction occurs with the automatic docking procedure, and the Kellion is badly damaged. However, the crew lands safely and sets off to find the Ishimura's crew. It quickly becomes apparent that the Ishimura was abandoned. As they enter the flight lounge, Isaac Clarke, the crew's engineer, enters a separate room to access the Ishimura's damage reports. As he does so, the flight lounge locks down in quarantine, and grotesque humanoids break into the lounge and attack the crew. Corporals Johnston and Chen are killed, while two survivors of the attack, Zach Hammond and Kendra Daniels, flee, urging Isaac to run. The defenseless Isaac is forced to run for his life through a hallway before escaping his pursuers through an elevator. He later manages to find a weapon and make contact with Hammond and Kendra through a window. Hammond, realizing many ship systems are failing, including the anti-asteroid defenses, recognizes the threat posed by a nearby asteroid belt and sends Clarke throughout the ship to repair its core systems so they may live. He also promises to help Isaac find his girlfriend, Nicole Brennan, an Ishimura medical worker seen at the beginning of the game in a strange video received by Isaac. Indeed, Clarke's sole reason for taking the mission was to find out what happened to her. After restoring the Ishimura's tram system, Clarke returns to the flight lounge to repair the Kellion, but before he can begin, the creatures attack the shuttle and it explodes, its wreckage plummeting to the bottom of the hangar bay. During these treks, Clarke discovers various text and audio logs scattered throughout the ship, using them to piece together events that occurred before he had arrived. The ship's captain, Benjamin Mathias, was actually an agent of the Church of Unitology, a large and influential religious cult assigned to retrieve one of the religious holiest relics, known as the Red Marker, from Aegis 7, a planet quarantined for undisclosed reasons centuries ago by the Earth government. Disregarding the quarantine, the CEC had performed mineralogical analysis on the planet, revealing it to be extraordinarily rich in resources. While establishing a planet-side colony to aid in mineral extraction, CEC employees discovered the Red Marker and the Unitologist. Among the crew passed the clandestine information to the Church. The Church and Captain quickly replaced or won over many of the Ishimura's ranking medical and science officers. With the upper echelon of the ship in Unitologist's hands and recordings of the mining operation already confidential due to the Aegis 7 quarantine, the Unitologist seized the opportunity to capture the marker, planning to discover the secrets of the human creation, evolution, and purpose they believed lay within. Immediately after the marker was discovered, a large portion of the civilians' planet side began to suffer from extreme hysteria and paranoia, brought on by violent hallucinations. After the marker was extracted and brought to the Ishimura, the same cases were reported on the ship. Though the medical teams at each location screened for disease and distributed sedatives, the crew agitation could not be contained for long, and the outbreak of paranoia evolved into mass homicidal and suicidal impulses. Though believed to be caused by proximity to the marker, the colonists had no idea how or why this occurred. At the same time, an unidentified fleshy growth had begun building up in the ventilation systems of both the colony and the Ishimura. Despite this, the crew's hysteria was kept under control until a planet crack commenced a week later. Immediately after the planet crack, the colony's power went out and unknown organisms began ravaging the colony, infecting the bodies of the dead and turning them into necromorphs, abominations that killed and infected dead bodies in order to spread the infestation. When reports of this reached the Ishimura, Captain Mathias cut off all ship colony traffic and communications to prevent the infection from reaching the ship. The chief science officer, Dr. Terence Kine, urged Captain Mathias to halt the extraction and send out a distress signal. But as they were a restricted system, Mathias refused, becoming ever more focused on delivering the marker to the Church, even at the expense of his crew's safety. Kine, believing the decision irrational and the captain buckling under the psychological pressure of his loyalties to the Church, attempted to relieve the captain of his duty under maritime law. Mathias refused to comply, spouting fanatically about heresy. Kine, attempting to sedate the captain, told him to be still, but Mathias, struggling violently, was killed by Kine in the scuffle. The syringe, missing his neck, rammed through his eye socket. While Kine did not appear to want to kill the captain, and the death may have been a freak accident, it may have been momentary loss of control, as the marker of the ship caused the same homicidal paranoia experienced on the colony. The infection then spread to the Ishimura via a colony shuttle piloted by a survivor unaware of the Necromorph had entered his shuttle prior to takeoff. The shuttle crashed into the docking bay, allowing the creatures to escape into the Ishimura's ventilation system and began killing and infecting its inhabitants shortly thereafter. All of the emergency shuttles and escape pods of the Ishimura were remotely launched, all empty. Furthermore, the communications array became damaged either by the same saboteurs or by the creatures beginning to rampage throughout the ship. In an attempt that claimed her life, a member of the ship's security team was able to launch a distress beacon, which was picked up by the CEC, who then dispatched the Kellyan. Simultaneously, the EarthGov military became aware of the Ishimura's trespassing in the system and dispatched a special operations team to deal with the suspected outbreak and perform search and rescue. By the time the Kellyan arrived, the Ishimura had almost completely fallen to the Necromorphs. Though Hammond stated he was unaware of the marker's role in everything, Daniels confided to Clarke she believed Hammond was lying. Clarke later encountered his girlfriend Nicole, though they could not meet directly. She was behaving strangely. With the critical systems repaired, Hammond, Clarke, and Daniels were able to launch a beacon for rescue, attracting a nearby military ship called the USM Valor. However, the Valor picks up a damaged escape pod that had been jettisoned by the Hammond containing a Necromorph, becomes overrun with the creatures, and crashes into the Ishimura. Hammond deduces from the heavy military equipment found on board the Valor was actually assigned to destroy the Ishimura, suggesting someone outside Aegis 7 knew about the alien threat. A log found by Clarke aboard the Valor reveals the Marines were aware of the red marker and its danger, referring to it as Marker 3A. The group decide they must find a shuttle and escape while they can. Clarke and Hammond retrieve the Valor's singularity core in order to repair an available shuttle, but Hammond is killed by a brute necromorph in the process. The surviving Terrence Kyne later contacts Clarke, urging him to return the marker to Aegis 7. He reveals in a video that a large creature controlling all of the necromorphs, known as the Hive Mind, began ravaging the colony after the planet cracked. He believes the marker also has the power to trap the Hive Mind back inside the planet if it is returned to the excavation site, and concludes the only way to contain the massive creature is to return the marker to the planet. However, Daniels points out the disconcerting fact that Kyne appears to be in a deranged state, as he frequently converses with and takes orders from his wife, Emilia, who had been dead for years, according to an audio log found by Clarke. After Clarke assists him in loading the marker onto the shuttle, Kyne is murdered by Daniels, who reveals the truth behind everything. She is a government operative ordered to retrieve the marker for her superiors with the assistance of the USM Valor. Marker 3A is a reverse-engineered copy of an alien black marker found on Earth and had been placed on Aegis 7 hundreds of years prior to scientists could study its effects. These scientists discovered that the symbols covering the surface of the marker represented DNA instructions for the necromorph infection. The newly created infection escaped, killing and transforming the doctors as if the original colony fell apart, and the marker was abandoned on the surface above the Hive Mind's resting place. The government then marked Aegis 7 as off-limits and abandoned the planet. After explaining this to Clarke, Daniels leaves the shuttle without him, but Nicole arrives as if to help him recall it, prompting Daniels to flee via an escape pod. Clarke takes the shuttle with the marker to the colony, placing it back as Nicole appears from behind it and states that they are whole. This causes the marker to emit an immense wave of energy that disrupts the gravity tethers holding a large portion of the planet several miles off the surface, threatening to destroy the colony. As Clarke attempts to escape, Daniels appears, taking the marker back to the shuttle as the Hive Mind is heard, crying out in anger from below. Through a fully recovered transmission, she shows Clarke that Nicole actually committed suicide well before they arrived at the Ishimura. The marker has been using visions of Nicole in order to get Isaac to return it to the Hive Mind. Daniels tries to flee, but gets killed by the gigantic Hive Mind, which Clarke manages to defeat. Leaving the marker behind, Clarke takes off with the shuttle just before the rock crashes into the planet, ravaging the surface of Aegis 7. As he sets course away from Aegis 7, Nicole's suicide video plays. Clarke stops it, then simply stares into space. He's suddenly attacked by what seems to be a vision of a bloodied Nicole. The screen suddenly covered in marked symbols along with Nicole's screaming, then cuts to black and static. The main series Dead Space games has been critically acclaimed. The first Dead Space, in particular, is often considered one of the greatest video games of all time, with its innovations in the survival horror genre highlighted. In an article on the series from 2018, Game Informer said the title stood out for its unique gameplay, gimmicks, and atmosphere compared to other video games of the time. Magazine Play in 2015 featured on the game's production said that Dead Space distinguished itself by incorporating more action elements into established genre elements, and positively compared its atmosphere to BioShock from 2007 and Metro Last Light from 2013. In a 2014 article concerning the series' later developments, Kotaku cited it as one of the best horror games of the 7th generation consoles. At release, Dead Space reached 10th place in North American game sales compiled in November of the NPD Group, recording sales of 193,000 units. It was the only new property from EA to enter the top 10 rankings. In early analysis, low sales of the title were attributed to strong market competition at the time. Those sales improved over time due to positive critical reception. By December 2018, the game had sold 421,000 units across all platforms, but was still considered commercial disappointment when taking into account its extensive marketing costs. Electronic Arts CEO John Riccitiello revealed that the company would have to lower its expected income for that fiscal year due to multiple commercial disappointments, like Dead Space. In February 2009, Electronic Arts CFO Eric Brown confirmed that all versions of Dead Space had sold 1 million copies worldwide. I hope you enjoy this. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to see more. And goodbye.